Okay, Biology 115, before watching this, you should have completed protein structure. So in this particular lecture, we're going to talk about how the environment will affect the protein structure. So skills to master here, describe the structure-function relationship in proteins. This is really, really important. That's going to be a big theme in this class, structure-function relationships. You're going to list 3 environmental conditions that affect protein structure, and then what you should think about is giving an example of each condition that affects protein structure. So that's something that we're not going to cover in the lecture that you should just think about on your own. So structure-function relationships, these are really, really important in biology. And so, for example, this particular enzyme has its active site here, and it's got special amino acids in it to do its special chemistry, and they're all lined up and ready to go. And if we change the structure of that to maybe look like this, those special amino acids are no longer touching. And so now it's not going to have the same function because the structure won't allow it. So the structure-function relationship is really intuitive, and it just makes sense that in order to have a particular function, you need to have a particular structure. And this is true in proteins. This is also true in your cell phone. If the microphone wasn't in the right place, it would not function as a cell phone. If the microphone was up by the earpiece, then it wouldn't work, right? So even though all the parts are there, they have to be also in the correct place. So that's the structure-function relationship. And we're going to see this theme repeated throughout in every single part of the cell. It has a particular structure that serves a particular function. And when you alter that structure enough, you can actually develop new functions and lose old functions. And that's one of the ways that evolution works, is developing new structures, new functions. Okay, so nitty-gritty of this, let's list the 3 environmental conditions that affect protein structure. That would be pH, salt, and temperature. And so some of these really, really make a lot of sense off the get-go. So pH, milk is a protein. pH means acids and bases. Lemon juice is an acid. If you add lemon juice to milk, it makes it curdle. So it changes the structure. And if you change the structure, you change the function. So that's one good example. And so each enzyme actually has an optimum pH, and you could probably guess that the optimum pH for most proteins is right around pH 7, right around that neutral pH. That's where most biological pHs occur. So somewhere between 6 and 8 is the optimum pH. So as enzyme activity increases, it's going to hit its highest value right around pH 7 for most proteins. And it gives us this bell-shaped curve. And so what this means is if the pH is too low, this is bad, because we don't get the same enzyme activity, we don't get the function, because we've changed the structure. And if it's too high, same thing. We don't get the activity because we've changed the structure. Okay, and we see the same pattern in salt. There's a certain amount of salt that's good. So as the concentration of salt increases, salt. So as the concentration of salt increases this way, and the pH is increasing this way, so this is 14, right? And this is 0. So it goes from 0 to some number. There's going to be an amount of salt that gives you a peak, the best enzyme activity. So again, this is enzyme activity. Enzyme activity. So we see this bell curve. Too little is bad. Too much, also bad. And we see the same pattern in temperature. And this makes a lot of sense. Maybe you haven't thought about salts, but in terms of pickling, if you put something in, you pickle by adding lots and lots of salt. That's called brine. So you put a cucumber in and you get out a pickle. So it tastes different. And that's a good preservative because all that extra salt inhibits all those proteins. It stops anything from being able to live in there. So it's a way we can preserve food is by adding a lot of salt. And also, if you've ever been to the beach, the ocean a lot, you can feel the effects of salt in your hair. It makes your hair crunchy. Your hair is a protein. And temperature, this also makes a lot of sense, right? Because if you look at a piece of raw meat, so meat is protein, it's made of muscles, it's mostly proteins. And then you look at it after it's cooked, it's a different color. It's a different texture, it's a different flavor. And that's because the temperature has affected the proteins. So cooking it actually changes the temperature, the texture, and the flavor of your food. And again, there's an optimum temperature for enzyme activity. And most of the time, it's somewhere between room temp and body temperature, right in here. So most of your proteins function around your body temperature. That's the best. So if you have a fever, suddenly the temperature is increasing, and that's really, really bad because your cells can't function if their proteins aren't there. If their proteins are unfolding, your cells can't function. So that's why fevers are really, really dangerous. And this is also why you cook your food, because as you increase the temperature, you're killing all those bacteria. But the same thing happens if you decrease the temperature. If it's called hypothermia, right, in your body. So if you decrease your temperature, then you could also die because your proteins don't work as well during that temperature either. Okay.